Welcome back, everyone. Let's continue our discussion on impacts of globalization. So, what we did was we have already looked into the economic impact of globalization, and now we are moving on to political impact of globalization. Now, again, you remember, whenever we talk about impact of globalization or impact of any other force of change for that matter, we have to look into it in the light of positive and negative. Now, when we talk about political impacts, the first thing is that there has been an exchange of political ideas. Ideas like liberty, equality, fraternity. Where is it all coming from? It is coming from French Revolution, and we have it here in India. Think of the idea of democracy. Think of a parliamentary setup. All these ideas, all these institutions found their emergence elsewhere and have been a force of influence on Indian political system. Similarly, you'll find that there are various governance initiatives. There are various ways in which administration is being carried out across the globe. So it is not just that India is accepting those ideas, they influence each other. Now, when we talk about these exchange of political ideas, these political ideas need not always be positive. There can be negative political ideas as well. There can be politicians or political parties influenced by authoritarian ideas, influenced by the ideas of repression of the public. There can be politicians who are inspired by the idea of not letting media do its job. And thereby you find that it is not just only positive exchange of political ideas, but it can also have a negative connotation. Then moving on, you find problems like corruption spreading because of globalization. So even in India, we find that a lot of money has been transferred to international bank accounts. Now, without globalization, it would not have been possible. Now, this corruption can also take a different scale. That these politicians, people in government, can collaborate with other governments and make money. These politicians and government officials can collaborate with your terrorists and lead to a spread of terrorism. So these are basically the negative impacts of spread of globalization or spread of political ideas. Then another thing is public awareness is something which is also a product of globalization, because globalization gave us technology, globalization gave us ICT, and with which we can now make public aware. Other thing is, it's not that the ideas about public awareness or various government schemes were not there, but they are improvised, looking at other examples. So say a particular scheme, a policy has done well in a certain state. All other states will try to analyze what is it that they did better. They look into the implementation part, they look into the design part of that policy and try to adapt that, try to change their own policy. Also, when it comes to public awareness, people are also more aware about the nitty-gritties of politics. Otherwise, politics was just a local affair. People would sit around, gather around the village or maybe the urban areas that they are in, and would have only exposure to those ideas, those things that are there. Now, with globalization, there has been expansion. With globalization, there has been expansion of mass media. Now, people know what is happening around the world. So, it is not just shaping the ideas of various political parties and governments, it is also shaping the ideas of people in general. Yes, public awareness will fall under positive ideas only. Then various governments collaborate with each other in making policies. They help each other in making policies, but it can become negative if there is undue influence of any other political power or any other country on your national affairs. Just think about the influence of, say, USA on Indian policy making. Yes, there can be collaboration. There is a lot to learn between these parties. They can learn a lot from each other, but they can have undue influence on each other's national policies as well. Then your international relations, in the matters of cooperation, as I've told you about various regional groupings, various international groupings, that multiple countries come together, they have an objective, and they say that we are going to cooperate to achieve these objectives. But they can also lead to conflict as well, the conflicts that are going around. So with globalization, these things become possible. Now, there are international organizations which help other countries, which help poorer countries develop their economies, which help in resolving conflict between various countries. They help in various ways. But these international organizations also stamp on the sovereignty of the state. That means they influence the state policies. People think that it is our national government which is making these policies, but ultimately there'll be a lot of influence of your multinational corporations, as we have discussed in the previous part, and also these international organizations and your dominant states. So these all can be basic impacts or political impacts of globalization. Now, we do not have to go into details of this because it is not a subject matter here, and we primarily have to reach our socio-cultural change. Now, come to environmental impact. One impact is, as we have already discussed, as a reason for spread, that multiple countries, various international organizations are collaborating with each other, are cooperating with each other in the fight against climate change. They're coming together, sharing technology, sharing ideas to tackle this menace. Also, there has been a rise of international organizations in the field of environment. But another problem is that because of globalization, now one company, any industry can open up any company can open up their industries in any other country. Now, what they do is they look for the countries which are soft targets, where you do not have a very tight implementations of environmental related laws or environment related laws. What they do is they open up their industries there and they flout all the environmental norms, which is also an impact of globalization. Similarly, you'll find dumping of waste from developed countries in developing countries. So the way we were talking about China dumping its products in other countries, flooding their market with cheap products, and over a period of time taking over the entire market. Think of your toys, etc., that come from China in India. Similarly, these developed countries dump their waste product on the seashores of developing countries. And you would ask, why would they agree? They would agree for money, for a price. That if you pay us this price, we are fine with you dumping your waste here. So this environmental problem has also been a byproduct of globalization. Now, with globalization, there has been an increase in consumption of goods. You find that you every now and then, after every year or so, in 6 months, you need a new phone, you need a new jeans, you need a new, say, laptop. So the globalization has also increased consumerism. Now, because of this consumerism, we are generating a lot more waste than we should. And all this waste, where does it go? What do we do with it? We simply dump it in the oceans, we dump it in the landfills, which is also an environmental hazard. So you find even in India, in bigger cities, you find heaps and heaps of waste lying there on land. And from a distance, they look like mountains. So, for example, here in Delhi, you'll find that the dumps that we have, the landfills that we have taken such a, have become so huge that from far away, they look like an extension of the Aravlis, which they are not. So not just that they are environmental hazards, but they are also health hazards. And you would have found various reports of people living in the vicinity of these landfills. Where is it coming from? From consumerism. Consumerism, which is a byproduct of globalization. But also with global cooperation, the idea of sustainable development has been pushed. So which countries have to follow? Then you can think of carbon credits, etc. In all these areas, they collaborate, they cooperate with each other to make things better. And also with globalization, there has been increase in public awareness, wherein people now are more and more aware that we should not generate waste beyond the capacity, or we should not generate waste as much as possible. But otherwise, you see that this globalization also has a huge impact on environment. Now also, I'll just give you a gist of a story that I uh, had gone through a couple of months ago. So it was about recycling the products. Now yes, globalization has made recycling possible. Globalization has popularized recycling things. But you find that in countries like the United States, where most of the norms are very strict, you find that not less than not more than 10% of recyclable waste is being recycled. Recyclable plastic, which are being labeled that these are the ones which can be recycled, not more than 10% of that plastic waste is being recycled. Just think about the situation that we'll have here in India. And plastic, we know that it is an environmental hazard. But what happens is, because of globalization, because of the increasing power of these global corporates, of these multinational companies, they impact or they influence the government policies, they flout the norms, they go away simply paying a price for it. They just, all they need is corrupt officials in the government, and their job is done. So globalization, yes, it has given a few positives in the field of environment, but at the same time, it has contributed negatively to the environment as well. Okay. Now we are coming to a subject matter, which is socio-cultural impact of globalization. Now in socio-cultural impact, before we start with this, remember there are 4 levels of impact that we have discussed. One is that we accept and coexist with these forces of change, that is globalization. Then the other idea is getting completely subsumed in the Western culture or in the global culture. Then the third idea is that you reject it completely. And finally, there can be an amalgamation of these two. So global culture plus the local culture, they can create something new. Now, what you have to do is, we have to, again, when we talk about socio-cultural impacts, we have to again think in terms of positive and negative. And also, what you have to do is, do not think of reaching a conclusion, because it is not always possible when it comes to society. Reaching a conclusion is not always possible. So all we can do is, we can take a balanced stand, and that is going to be more than sufficient. So what we have discussed, and I've given you a brief background, that how you can look into the impact of various institutions on the impact of globalization on various institutions of the Indian society. So the way you proceed with family, that is the same way in which you have to proceed with marriage. Then comes your caste system. Even in caste system, you can think about how the value system has changed, which is leading to a decline in the caste system, or making the or say denting the rigidity of caste system. Now, next idea is the idea of religion. Can anyone here suggest that what is the impact of globalization on religion? One idea, simple idea, is that globalization has led to an increase in the diversity in matters of religion. So one can be thought of as globalization leading to an increase in diversity. How? You have Christians here, you have Jewish people here, then you'll find Zoroastrians, etc. But apart from this increasing diversity, and we have already discussed the aspect of diversity, that it will both increase and decrease with modern forces, what other impacts are there on religion when it comes to globalization? Okay, so yes, great. So religion, every religion has rituals. These rituals get impacted. Yes, religion is losing importance. As we say, that with these modern forces, and globalization is one of the modern forces, you say that secularization happens. So with secularization, the significance of the religion goes on declining. Also, now that various countries, various societies are open to the entry of other religions, it can also lead to conversions of local people or local religion, people from local religion to another religion. So you can take example of tribals. You can take any other example of conversion in Indian society. But also at the same time, with secularization, you see that religion is losing its significance and giving way to scientific temper. Also, with globalization, religion is losing its significance, not just in matters of religion or not just in matters related to religion, but other matters as well. Think about your education. Think about your economic life. Everywhere you find that religion is on a decline. Also, with forces of globalization, you learn about new values of equality, etc. With that, you find that there is interference in religion, in matters of religion, and they pick up newer issues. So, for example, the burqa issue in France was discussed not just in France, but all across the globe. And a lot of countries started looking into that idea, whether it is right or wrong, so on and so forth. So, it is not just about uh, say religion getting influenced, but these religious ideas will influence people across the globe. Now, this has also made religion a private affair. So rather than calling it independent, you can call it that globalization has made religion a private affair. So this way you can think in terms of how religion has been impacted by globalization. Another idea is that one thing is that we have covered the institutions. Then the other idea is that we have to think about various sections of Indian society. Now, what I would want you to do is you have to take up women and elderly and try to analyze that what kind of impact would they have on these social, would your globalization have on these social groups. If you want to think, just think about this. Just think about this. How do you go about it? Because women do not have any features, right? Social institutions, when it comes to social institutions, you take up their features and look into aspects of change. But when it comes to various social groups or various sections of the society, what you have to do is you have to think in terms of dimensions of their life. What do I mean by this? That when you take women, for example, you'll find that they have a social life, political one, and then they have what else? Their economic life. Then you can think about the impact of technology, etc., of globalization on all these dimensions. So when it comes to, say, social, you can think of their role within the institution of family. You can think of their role within the institution of marriage. Right? You can think in terms of empowerment or their social status. Right? So now let's first start with the impact of globalization on women. This is something that you have to contribute to. I've laid down the basic structure. What I'm trying to say is, when it comes to various social institutions, the easiest way to figure out whether it has changed or not is to look into its features and decide whether things have changed or not. But when it comes to various sections of the society, what you have to do is you have to take up their dimensions of life and then proceed. So starting with women, let's start with the economic dimension. What kind of changes has globalization brought about to the economic life of women? And you have to think both in terms of positive and negative. Both in terms of positive and negative. Anyone? Okay, yes. So economic independence to women. Great. So now with increasing levels of education, which comes under the social indicator, with increasing levels of education and skilling and literacy rates in women, you find more women are taking up jobs. Now, what happens is if they take up job, they become financially independent and they cannot be suppressed within the family. They cannot be suppressed in matters related to any other aspect of their life. So basically, with education, with awareness, with skilling, empowerment happens. And with empowerment, they become their own master. So yes, economic dimension, with globalization, the idea of equality got popularized. Now with this idea of equality, you find that now women get equal share in your family property. Can anyone highlight negative economic impacts of globalization on women? Negative economic impacts, because social is easy, but negative economic impacts of globalization on women. Economic dimension, negative impact on economic dimension. Divorce has do not get into the social dimension. Just think about economic dimension. So yes, the problem associated with consumerism, as we have just discussed. Great, Akansha. So Akansha is saying there is this dual burden of work on women now. As discussed within the, say, framework of family, we are saying that now women have to go out and work. They have to take care of household responsibilities, which amounts to dual burden of work on women. Great. Yes, so you can still think of economic inequalities. Before coming to this, Ragini, what you can think about is that what kind of jobs globalization has created. So yes, one idea is that the gig economy that is functioning now, it employs a lot of women as well. But again, there is this pay gap, there is gender discrimination when it comes to various kinds of job. So when it comes to economic dimension, I'm just giving you this idea here. We'll cover it completely with role of women. There is this concept of pink collar jobs that you'll find in, particularly in jobs like a receptionist, in jobs like say your telecallers, nurses, air hostesses. You find that it is generally dominated by women. It is generally women who will be found in that profession. The reason is they are being limited to certain forms of employment. Rather than opening up the entire market for them, you're just limiting them to certain number of jobs. Also, you find that with the global gender index, or the global gender parity index, you found that still we do not find a lot of women in leadership roles in industries. So still there is this patriarchal, this inherent bias when it comes to economic level. So yes, lower pay for similar work, pay scale differentiation, this is the same thing. Okay. So these can be positive and negative impacts of globalization on economic life of women. Now come to their political life. One idea is everyone got right to vote. Everyone got right to representation. Why? Because these ideas entered India from other countries because of globalization, and everyone, including women, were provided a right to vote. But also, you find that there can be negative aspect. So yes, reservation. So the women reservation bill is again a positive. Okay, yes, so women representatives put women issues better, but again, you find there is inequality when it comes to their political life. So I'm not going into greater detail because these aspects will be covered as forms of inequality when it comes to women under role of women. So yes, proxy representation. So the joke was being made when they passed the women reservation bill. So they're saying the way you have sarpanch patis in, or you have sarpanch patis in your panchayati raj institutions, the same way you'll have sansad patis once the women reservation bill comes into picture. Yes, Aniket, will come to this preference to son, etc., all those things. But also you still find that there are newer things like say gender budgeting that are there, which can be considered as a positive, because not everything has necessarily originated in India. And and you see that most of our policies are influenced by whatever is happening in international arena. Okay, now come to the most important dimension, that is a social dimension, because when you talk about the impact of globalization on women, you would have to stick to the socio-cultural aspect. Anyone who would want to discuss about this thing? So yes, more social inclusion, more empowerment to women. They have now say a good say in matters of family. Then when it comes to the institution of marriage, now they can choose the spouse because the rules of spouse selection has changed, etc. So all those changes related to women within family and marriage can be mentioned here. You can talk about the patriarchal norms, that the patriarchal norms are being say diluted in a country, and we are moving more towards an egalitarian society. Then similarly, when it comes to socio-cultural, you'll find that the position of women has definitely improved, but not to a very great extent. Yes, there are less instances of child marriage. Then also what happens with globalization is that you get better healthcare services. So you can think of the social sector for that matter. You get better healthcare services. Now education is available to all. Himanshu, I'll come to a question. This is a question I've already posed to you. I'll come back to your question. So you say that you get better education. Now you look at the gross enrollment ratio in our country. So you'll find that it is pretty much similar for girls and boys. But then there are still a few issues related to women when it comes to the social dimension, which are a direct byproduct of globalization. Now, because of globalization, you have issues like commodification of women. That means women are treated as mere objects. Their feelings do not matter. Just think about all the show business that you have. Look at your mass media, look at your movies, the way women are depicted. No Bollywood movie seems to work on the box office if there's no item song, wherein they have to wear all the exposing clothes, etc. So yes, some might consider it as empowerment, but empowerment has a different idea. So empowerment is an idea will be considered, will be discussed later. But think about this: the way women are commodified in mass media. Not just that, you find that your ideas are being shaped by social media. Now, these ideas about women, newer ways to harass women, are also a product of globalization. Cybercrime is again a product of globalization. Harassing women over the phone is a product of globalization because now they are not even safe within the boundaries of their household. Yes, previously as well, there were cases of domestic violence, but now, apart from family, even people in public can harass women. Similarly, when it comes to the economic life, you can talk about sexual harassment at workplace. So yes, there have been positive and negative impacts both. Himanshu has asked the question, what can be the negative political impact of globalization on women? So one can directly come from the sharing of political ideas, that every state has different ideas. So you have a lot of conservative states. Just think about a few Middle Eastern countries, the way they run their politics, the way they organize their society. Now, those ideas influence people sitting in other areas, people sitting in other parts of the world. And they think, see, they're prospering economically. And rather than, say, replicating their economic model, they would end up replicating whatever happens there. Also, you find that when it comes to matter of politics, and particularly matters of war, women, children, and elderly, they are the ones who get influenced the most, who are the ones who face the actual problem when it comes to matters of war. They are the targets. take the case of Manipur that happened very recently, that was brought to light very recently. You find that just to take revenge, just for a say matter of some communal politics, the kind of thing that they did there in Manipur. Now they are being treated as objects of war. They're fought around women because they understand them as softer targets, which is also because otherwise you find that particularly in Indian society, yes, we can say we were patriarchal in nature, etc. We were very regressive, everything is fine, yes, but you still find that women have always been respected, be it in the form of goddess. Whenever you wanted to say attach respect, so think of cow, think of India. So the depiction of India itself is generally coming from where? The depiction of India is in form of a woman, of a mother. So which tells you that yes, due respect was accorded to women. Yes, there was a lot of discrimination that still is there, and we are a long way away. But this abrasion of our value system, of the Indian value system, because of various forces of globalization, has brought us into a place where we are objectifying our women, where there are other forms of problems, inequalities. So I hope you got this idea that how to go about women. Similarly, if you want to think, okay, so AI is more harassing women. So yes, women are being harassed using various tools. So you can think of any form of cyber crime, any forms of sexual harassment, etc., that happens online. Now, when you think of elderly, you would have to think of various aspects of their life, say starting with economic aspect, then socio-cultural aspect, then rather than political aspect, you can specifically take up their health. You can again also take up various specialized institutions here as well when it comes to elderly, and particularly their emotional and psychological needs. So because of globalization, we see that the families have nuclearized, the value system has changed, and now we find that the elderly are left to cater to themselves. They are the ones who cannot take care of their socio-economic needs. They are the ones who cannot take care of their security needs. They are the ones who cannot travel all the way to the hospitals to take a healthcare service. So various negative aspects can be discussed, and we are going to take up elderly again as well as a separate topic under population. So various negative aspects can be thought about. So previously in a joint family, the elderly, they, because the way they were providing entertainment to the children, they were socializing children. At the same time, they were also, their emotional needs were also taken care of by the children in the family. Then their culture, whatever skills they had, they used to impart in their kids. But now what has happened is they are generally left to cater to themselves. And also when we discuss population, I'm going to use two terms, that ruralization of elderly population and the feminization of elderly population. We will be covering those themes there. But now you find that the elderly are left to cater to themselves in rural areas, and out of which you have more number of female members compared to male members. So the sex ratio is actually better when it comes to the elderly. But now also because of globalization, you find the life expectancy has increased. Their health indicators are getting better. You find that now you have digi health services. Sitting at home, you can take consultation from a doctor. Sitting at home, you can order a test. So they'll come to your home, take your sample, go away. No need to travel all the way to the hospital. Similarly, there are other positive impacts as well. Now they have better availability. Now they have better availability of various health related equipments. So think about, say, heart bypass surgery. Now it is not a big thing, because previously, otherwise, you find that a lot of elderly, they will end up having heart issues with age. But now it is being cured easily. Why? Because of globalization. Why? Because better health equipments, better health services are available to the elderly. So yes, elderly also have both positive and negative impacts. So also with nuclearization of the family, who takes care of their economic needs? So here you can also talk about the role of state when it comes to they're taking care of their economic needs. The state provides a pension to the elderly to take care of their economic needs. So yes, a few things have changed for the better, but a few things have gone for worse as well. No, Aditya is asking that are we going to discuss the impact of globalization on women as a separate chapter again? No, we are not going to. The chapter is role of women. The chapter is role of women, wherein we would have to focus on how the role of women has changed from traditional to modern Indian society. What are the factors of change? What are the factors that are responsible for continuity? What are various problems related to women? This is what is going to be the subject matter. So that's why we have covered this dimension, these dimensions related to women here. So I hope the idea about elderly is clear. Now let's come to children. If you think of children, what all dimensions come to your life? Their dimension related to education, related to socialization, related to their health, related to various opportunities. These are various dimensions of children. There can be more. It is not an exhaustive list. Do not worry about it. All I'm trying to teach you is how to go about these questions. Because when you find them in the examination, you will be surprised that okay, they have taken up only just one single aspect out of all these dimensions, and they have asked you to elaborate on that. Where do you get your content from? Now you'll be able to learn that skill to say create content sitting there in the examination hall within those 7-8 minutes with practice. And we are going to practice more and more number of questions. So even though we are discussing say impact of globalization of women, it was a question. Impact of globalization on elderly, it was a question. So now again, coming to children, the first thing is that we see that the function of family, which was to socialize children, has changed. Now the children get socialized by mass media. The children get socialized by specialized institutions like daycare, crutches, etc. So they have a lot of impact of other value systems, of other cultures on them right from their childhood. Then similarly, you find that there have been changes with respect to the education system. One, education has been made universal. Now there can be no discrimination whatsoever on the basis of your caste, creed, etc. when it comes to matters of education. The education has become more scientific. And now with the new education policy, you find that more and more focus is on skill development. That the education that we are providing has to be allied with the requirements of the industry, with the skill set that the industry requires. Then also the education has become secular. It is not just based on religion. It develops a scientific temper in students. And you find that these are the kind of skills, these are the kind of things that you need to do well in your life. Then you come to the matters of health. Again, healthcare has improved, healthcare facilities have improved, but also there are newer diseases that are coming up. So this disease part can be related to elderly, to women, to children. You find that newer diseases are coming up, and these are the vulnerable sections. So elderly and children, you already know that they are the most vulnerable to any kind of diseases. So with these new diseases coming up, they are more prone to falling sick and losing their lives. But again, better healthcare equipment is available, better healthcare services are available, which work to their advantage. And overall, we see that because the healthcare system has been getting stronger and better over the years, we find the life expectancy, both in children and elderly, has increased, has improved. So, which shows that yes, There have been negative impacts on health because of globalization, because of increasing pollution, because of the say processed foods that you get in the market. But at the same time, you find that because of better healthcare facilities, the life expectancy has increased. They're supposedly having a better quality of life in the era of globalization. So the health, again, I'm not going to cover it completely. You will get those perspectives from here, from there. So when it comes to health, nutrition is something that is of primary importance. So you can think in terms of the kind of nutrition that you get from the junk food that we eat these days. So the children get impacted negatively in terms of health because of the junk food, the processed food that is available. Also, you can think of pollution. To summarize this, this will the determinants of health. There is something called determinants of health that basically talks about various indicators, uh, various aspects which impact health of an individual. So what we'll do is I'll cover this with the chapter on women, with role of women, but you can apply that, you can use those indicators elsewhere as well. So right now I'm just giving you a brief idea that when it comes to health, nutrition is the most important part. But apart from nutrition, there are other factors as well. Because if a child is coming from a poor household, they would not have enough to complete their nutrition. There would not be proper sanitation facilities. Now, because of globalization, there has been urbanization. Because of urbanization, there has been an upsurge in number of slums. Now, children particularly living in these slums, fall sick very often, which ultimately lead to lose them on their education front as well. Now, again, I'm saying that whatever I'm speaking, you need not remember. You do not have to remember right now. What you have to do is, while revising, just try to break these things down. If you do not understand, you can either drop me a mail, else you have this recording available. And also, this is just our second, third lecture. That's why you're not able to relate a lot with determinants of health, determinants of education, etc. But those things, everything will fall in place as we proceed through the syllabus, because we cannot expect to learn everything in one place. So what I'm doing is I'm covering the basic aspects, but you'll get a specialized understanding of health in the chapter on health. You'll get a specialized understanding on the matters of education on the in the chapter on education. So we will cover those things there. Now, children have better opportunities to get education. They can move abroad, study there. Now, even foreign schools, universities are trying to open up their campuses here. They have digital means of learning, which enhances their education, the experience of learning. They have newer books available. They have literature from all across the globe available on the tip of their finger. So, similarly, you can see that they have better opportunities when it comes to work, because later, somewhere down the line, they would have to work. So they'll be better equipped, they'll be better skilled. They get exposure to multiple or to value systems and cultures of various places. They learn multiple languages. Think about a child living in, say, the area of Bangalore or in the region of Bangalore. You'll find them speaking at least 4 to 5 languages. So, not necessarily foreign languages, they are local, they also speak local languages, but ultimately you find that our curriculum is also influenced by various forces. Our curriculums have introduced international languages. So all in all, you find that there has been a positive impact on children, but there can be negative impact as well. So on this note, what I'll do is, I'm telling you this beforehand. I'm going to give you a question tomorrow. I'm going to give you a question tomorrow, and you have to write about the role of technology, particularly the role of technology on children, on socialization of children. That's going to be one of the questions for tomorrow's weekly test. So I'm telling you beforehand, you can just search it if you want. But before you search it, what I would want you to do is, you take up technology as one force of change, and you think about various dimensions of their life, and you try applying this to all those dimensions. That's how you have to go about it. But at all find yourself if you at all find yourself in a situation where you are not able to conceptualize it all, then it will be better to just search for it. You might not get the answer. I'm not sure whether you'll get the answer or not online, but at least you'll get somewhere some ideas around it. But please try it on your own first. Is tomorrow a class? No, you'll not have a class tomorrow. Now the next class is going to be on next Saturday. That is 21st of October. You'll have your next class on 21st of October. The question is impact of technology on children. I'm not giving this question today. I'll give it for the weekly test because I just want to frame it in a different manner. I just want to make it a little specific and easier. So these are a few impacts of globalization on various social groups, on various institutions. What you can do is you can think about the impact of globalization on the differently abled section. You can think about the impact of globalization on your scheduled tribes. This is something that you have to take up on your own. But if you're not able to do it, you'd let me know in the next session that is going to be on next Saturday. If you're not able to do it, I'll take it up and discuss it. But the thing is, you should know how to do it yourself, because these are the kind of questions that are being asked. Because they have asked about women and elderly, they can definitely ask about children. They can definitely ask about, say, any other section of the society. So you better be prepared, because it would not be possible to cover all the sections in these lectures, because if we start doing each and everything, we would never be able to complete our lectures. So the best part is I'll make you understand the entire structure, and then we will and then you will try to conceptualize it and write for yourself. Okay, great. Now let's come to the socio-cultural impact of globalization. By now you would have understood that how to say think about the impact of globalization on various institutions, on various sections. Let's take up a few other themes. Just think of art and culture. When we say globalization, you find that because of globalization, you are now exposed to newer cultures. You are now exposed to newer arts, newer art forms. Then it is not just that you get to know about them, there is, say, amalgamation as well. Newer dance forms which mix the Western and the Indian are coming up. You find the use of, say, electronic instruments and merge them and combine them with our classical music. So you find various amalgamations of art and culture. Also, you find that various cultural forms, art forms have been, say, wholeheartedly accepted by the Indian society. Can anyone highlight any art form which is, say, not of Indian origin but is very popular in India? Any art form which is not of Indian origin but very popular in India? Any example for that? Yes, Abhinav, anyone else? Yes, so you can think in terms of the kind of music that we have, the type of dance that we are taking up to now, the newer forms of dance, the newer forms of, say, your rap music. Now you also find a little bit of rock music here and there. Then you find a lot of fusion happening in, say, Indian art industry. So all these are basically various impacts of globalization. So when you have to think about the impact of, or the socio-cultural impact of globalization on, say, art and culture, what you have to do is think of coexistence, that newer art forms coming or newer cultures influencing Indian society. Then you think of complete submission, that when it comes to culture, the language that we speak, the clothes that we wear, yes, it can be thought of complete submission. Then what do you have? Amalgamation. And then you have complete rejection of something. So why do we have to do this is, when it comes particularly to culture, we have to look at all these impacts. Because generally what happens is, people either write about the cultural influences that have happened, or about the backlash against the say advent of newer cultures, but they forget about the other two. They forget completely about amalgamation while writing answers. So that's why I had, say, right at the beginning, I had mentioned those levels of impact. And also, you have to remember, when we talk about any society, you'll find that there are all the kinds of people. There'll be people who will completely reject this. There'll be people who will actually mix it with something else and create something new. There'll be people who will be just neutral about it. They do not, yes, it is there, it coexists, they accept it. Then there'll be people who might be completely subsumed by these ideas, this culture. So we have to look at all the levels of impact. And by now, we have looked at these levels of impact at least 3 or 4 times. So it should have already gone into your memory. So maybe if you revise it once more, you'll be able to remember. Here, what I've given is, when it comes to the impact of, say, globalization on culture, here you have this example of rejection. Then you also find, because of complete submission to a foreign culture, we find that our local culture, our local art forms are under threat. And that's why your Ministry of Culture or Cultural Affairs is trying to revamp it, trying to renew these things. So, for instance, in Delhi, you have Delhi Art, wherein you have various artisans, various state awardees, national awardees who are into making these various art forms. So government is somehow trying to promote the local so that they can also, because ultimately these local art forms used to sustain these workers, these artisans. But where do they go now? All they know is all the skills that they have are limited to creating that particular art form. And if that art form doesn't sell in the market, is not popularized in the market, where do they go? Because they do not have any other skill. They do not have any agricultural land. So one idea is to preserve the Indian culture, and the other idea is to help the working class or to help the artisans who are involved in this. So I hope you got the idea of how socio-cultural impact of globalization has to be looked into. So what you have to do is take your levels of impact and go about it. Then impact of globalization on health. It has been discussed, say, pretty much with your impact of globalization on children. So you say that we have better healthcare facilities now, but at the same time, we have newer health hazards, better services, which ultimately lead to a better life expectancy, which ultimately lead to a better quality of life. But at the same time, you have health hazards like pollution, like newer diseases. If not for globalization, the entire world would not have got paralyzed because of your COVID-19. So newer diseases are also coming up. Also, if you think about education, under the impact of globalization, you find that your education is more scientific now. Your education is, say, has been secularized, devoid of religion. Also, you find that your education has become digitalized because of forces of globalization. But the negative impact is that these students are exposed to a lot of things that they should not have been at this young age. Think about pornography, because it is available on your phone. And kids as young as, say, the ones who are in 8th standard, 10th standard, everyone now has a cell phone. And these kind of things, various forms of violence, etc., are available. The kind of movies that are there, the kind of shows that we have, the kind of language that is used. Substance abuse has become a problem because of mass media. Because mass media has not just popularized it, but legitimized it. That yes, it is okay. And not just okay, but rather cool to indulge into drugs, to indulge into alcohol, to take up smoking. Because these are children. They have a very lasting impression of something that they watch on their television. So if the actor is holding a cigarette, they look at the actor, that see how cool is he looking. This is something that will give me that cool factor. and they take up to those habits. So all these impacts can be thought of, and then now what else you can do is the question that I've already told you, impact of technology, because technology is coming with globalization on various sections of society. Now apart from this, what I would want you to take up is that there are various other issues that are also coming into picture because of globalization. Yes, they are not going to ask these issues directly, but yes, you should always keep these mentioned here. And if at all new issues come up in the newspaper, you can mention those here. That human trafficking, again, a product of globalization. Child trafficking, women trafficking, everything is a product of globalization. Similarly, drug abuse, as already discussed, and not just drug abuse, but substance abuse. Because of globalization, because of opening up of state boundaries, people are able to smuggle those drugs, those substances into the country. And with their widespread network, they spread it across the country. And with mass media, it is being popularized, it is being legitimized, and children, youngsters, everyone takes up to those habits. Then the problem of cybercrime, as discussed in the context of women, but it is not just limited. It is not just limited to women, because anyone can become a victim of cybercrime. Think of your elderly, because now what happens is, if the children are living outside in another city, what they do is they buy the parents a smartphone so that they can video call them or speak to them as and when they want. But what happens is that the elderly are not much aware of the nitty-gritties of a cell phone. They do not understand. They only thing that they know about is, say, making a call or sending a text. And now they become very easy targets because they are not aware of the various security dimensions of the phone. And they are becoming, say, the number of elderly victims of your cybercrime has been on a rise over the years. Similarly, you think about the problem of fake news. In this globalized world where you have social media, you can just post it even before completing the sentence, right? It is so fast, it is so quick. Within within say few milliseconds, your post is published online. And now various terrorist groups, various political groups, various say these unsocial elements, what they do is they spread this fake news to maybe incite violence in the community. So for instance, this new violence that happened in Haryana, maybe last month or a month before that, what was it? It was a product of fake news which was being spread. What has made it possible? Your mass media. What has made it possible? Technology. What has made it possible? Globalization. So yes, mass media has a positive role as well. You get to know about newer ideas. The Me Too movement that started in the West was trickled down to each and every country in a matter of days. So that is a positive role of mass media. But you find that with the positive come the negatives as well. Also, then there is this idea of intellectual consumerism. I'll just make it simple for you. You do not have to get into the definitions of it. When we talk about consumerism, it is about using products very frequently or changing the products very frequently, consuming products more and more. So changing your clothes every 6 months or every 4 months. Now, with that is material consumerism, that you consume a lot, you generate a lot of waste, which is becoming a problem, which is becoming a menace. Yes, I totally agree to the fact that you might look nice or beautiful with your ever-changing clothes, with newer smartphones, say your iPhone, etc. But ultimately, the consumerism is becoming a problem because you do not know where to dump this e-waste. Yes, you can say that if people do not engage in consumerism, how is the market going to run? How are we going to develop economically? But ultimately, they have side effects as well. Similarly, intellectual consumerism is this bombardment of information that is available online. The moment you open Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, you have a lot of information, a lot of videos, a lot of blogs, vlogs, everything that is there. And we have become habitual of consuming that information. That information might not be useful for us. That information is tampering with our, conscious mind. That we just, if I ask everyone here that what is your idea of success, the chances are more than 90% of the people would have similar idea of success in life. Why? Because it is all coming from the internet. We have forgotten about our ideas, natural instincts. Just think about this. If at all you are in a situation which is, say, funny, maybe, what happens is you directly relate it to a meme that you had shared online, or you directly relate it to a movie. This is the level of intellectual consumerism that has happened. And also, it is not just limited to this idea. I'm just telling you in the context of globalization. That's why I'm limiting it here. Now, this information that you get might be wrong, might be right, might be something that can, because you see that students, or particularly youngsters, who fall into this trap of uh, just consuming and consuming and consuming a lot of information, sooner or later they start having some or the other mental issues. And generally, mental health is not that, is not considered to be very significant, particularly in our country, and they face a lot of trouble because of that. So the increased cases of substance abuse, depression are actually also coming from absorbing this information that is available online, which has been brought to you by globalization. So these are a few issues, few other issues related to impact of globalization. Now, what we'll do is, you have already learned the various levels of impact. Now, from those various levels of impact, there are a couple of terms, because now what they're doing is, they have started asking questions directly on these terms. So they've asked a question on socialization, which was generally considered to be a sociological term, and hence not to be found in GS paper, mains GS paper. But now they're using it. So what we'll do is, we'll just prepare you for the basic details. The entire structure is done. You have understood everything. These are coming from those levels of impact. So the first idea is that of localization. Now, as the word says, global plus local. The word says global plus local. So if you remember, we had gone through one of the levels of impact, which talked about amalgamation, right? So if there is an amalgamation of the global and the local, this process is called globalization. Now, there is an amalgamation of global. This example of this burger. Now you find that this is basically something continental, but in this you find a Mexican aloo tikki, right? So there are jalapenos, which did, which are generally, it's not that they're not available here, but they are generally considered to be Mexican food, part of Mexican food. So apart from jalapenos, you find this aloo tikki and tandoori sauce, which are Indian. So mixing the global with the local, creating a new product or a service, or creating a new culture altogether, is something that is called globalization. Just go through it, just read through it, and you'll understand. This is what basically amalgamation, one of the levels of impact. Now, then there is another idea of neolocalism. So we were saying that our local industries are taking a hit because of your global MNCs. Our local industries are taking a hit. So what to do about it? You cannot close yourself. Think of, just take example of a tourist place, like say Rajasthan. Now, the industries, etc., are taking a hit because of globalization, because of newer companies coming in, so on and so forth, that we have already discussed. And you find that you do not have the capacity, you cannot afford to close your market, you cannot afford to close your society. It has to stay open. Why? Because of the same modern value system, and also because of various economic and political, say, considerations. So you'll find that they'll talk about experiencing the local culture. So it is mixing the local with the neo. That means they will popularize, particularly the example of these tourist places. They'll popularize the local culture, that come, stay here with us and experience the local culture. Stay with the localites and experience the local culture. So still they are inviting people from outside, but ultimately to rejuvenate the local industry, ultimately to give the local a global appeal. Now, this local service or this local culture will become, say, uh, I need not say sensation, but it will become popular over the internet, over the globe, and then people will start coming. And hence, they will revive the local economy. This is what the idea of neolocalism is. So, just I'll just write this so that you do not forget the example. There can be other examples of neolocalism. Just think about it. There are various other examples of neolocalism wherein they try to revive the local culture. They try to revive the local culture without rejecting the ideas of modern world. What is this? Coexistence of both. What is this? Coexistence of both. Experience the local culture. I hope you got this idea, because these are simpler ideas. They would sound very simple, as we have already discussed the other aspects. Now you see these previous year questions, and okay, we have already discussed these questions. So the first question talks about the effects of globalization on the aged population in India. The other one talks about the positive and negative effects of globalization on women in India. So these two questions have already been discussed. Now what we'll do is we'll take up this third question, because this is something we have discussed indirectly, and we'll try to think about the introduction, we'll try to think about the conclusion, etc. But before we start with this question, let's take a quick 10-minute break. Let's take a 10-minute break and then let's start. And you have this question on the screen. You can just think about what can be the possible answer, what has to be the body part. So first you have to primarily think about the body part, and then we'll come to the introduction and conclusion. Okay, let's take a 10 minutes break and meet again at 6:50. Please be there by 6:50. Welcome back, everyone. Did you look into this question? That what is this question about and how do we have to proceed with this question? Okay. Globalization is usually said to promote cultural homogeneity, but it strengthens cultural specialities. Explain. This is the question. Globalization is usually said to promote cultural homogeneity, but it strengthens cultural specialities. Explain. Now, there are two ideas here that how globalization can be considered as a homogenizing force. And I think someone had asked this question previously, and how it strengthens cultural specialities. So, first, let's try to understand what is this cultural homogeneity that they are talking about. When it comes to culture, take various aspects related to culture. Think about various, say, the languages that we speak. Think about the clothes that we wear. Think about our value system. Think about various festivals that we celebrate. Think about our various cultural and art forms. And as we have already discussed, we find that when it comes to, say, matters of language, when it comes to various art forms like music, dance, etc., and even other art forms like modern art, when you think about the way you dress up, in all these aspects, we find that there is certain homogeneity that has been brought about in Indian society. Because otherwise, Indian society has been very diverse, not just limited to these aspects. Think about the aspect of religion. And if you remember, we were discussing this with diversity, that the diversity is decreasing. Everyone looks similar. Now you'll find it hard because at least a few years back, you could have easily identified between a person coming from rural areas and a person coming from urban areas. But today, even that boundary has diluted. It is very hard to find differences between a person, say, from northern part of the country and, say, someone from the eastern part of the country. They all look similar. They all wear the same clothes. The kind of food that we eat, the kind of rituals that we have, all these things you feel that have been homogenized, that there is no diversity that is left. So this is one aspect. Another aspect says that it strengthens cultural specialities as well. Now, before coming to the body part, because of body part, we'll talk about how it strengthens cultural specialities. This is going to be your body part because this is something that they have asked. So think about your introduction and conclusion first. In introduction, can't we talk briefly about the cultural homogeneity aspect? Or maybe in conclusion, can't we briefly talk about this cultural homogeneity aspect? That is one. Another way to introduce is, can you suggest any other way to introduce this answer? Any other way? Because this question is something where you would have to cover both the aspects, otherwise you'll run out of words. You'll run out of the words that you have to dedicate to the body part. So the introduction and the conclusion have to be strong as well. And also, you remember, when it comes to UPSC marking, they always give marks in steps. So introduction, 2 marks, body, 3 marks, conclusion, 2 marks, so on and so forth. So it is always in a stepwise manner. So okay, so talking about definition, so what you can do is you can talk about what is this cultural homogeneity. What is this cultural homogeneity that they are talking about? So what is cultural homogeneity and how Indian society is getting homogenized? So you can just use an example, because the introduction has to be limited. Either you talk specifically about a few aspects and how the Indian society has got homogenized culturally, or you talk about what is cultural homogeneity and you try to use a couple of examples from here to conclude your introduction. Okay, then another way to introduce this can be, what are these, not all the features, but what are the features which specifically impact cultural homogeneity or the culture? You can talk about what are the features which impact the culture. Then another way can be, just remember your levels of impact. You can talk about, there can be various levels of impact. It is not just that either it will promote cultural homogeneity or it will highlight the cultural specialities, but it can create something new. There can be amalgamation, right? So rather than writing about amalgamation, you can talk about various levels of impact. But please remember that rather than writing these tough words, you should you should better use various examples to explain these, to make your introduction sound simple. So I hope you have got the idea of how to introduce this question. Now coming to the body part, and you can alternatively use these dimensions in conclusion as well. So you can maybe conclude saying that yes, it strengthens cultural specialities, but at the same time, looking at these aspects, you can say that it is also promoting cultural homogeneity. Also, you can talk about, in conclusion, you can talk about the consequences, because there can be consequences of this social change, because ultimately globalization is bringing about the social change wherein the culture of the Indian society is undergoing change. So what can be the consequences of this change? But again, conclusion has to be brief, because most of the weightage has to go to the body part, which talks specifically about how globalization strengthens cultural specialities. Now I would need answer from you, that how do you think it strengthens cultural specialities? Because I've given you one example already in the form of levels of impact. If you can pick it up from there, just please think about it. How is it that globalization strengthens cultural specialities? Yes, great. Okay, so sorry, Ragni has already written that because of globalization and the role of mass media, we get exposed to newer cultures, which strengthens their cultural specialities. Similarly, this mass media gives us a stage to present these cultural specialities elsewhere. Just take an example. Take an example of your international dance festival. Now, in international dance festival, various countries, people coming from various nationalities, they will perform various art forms. Now, why is it possible? Because of globalization. Because of globalization, they can go elsewhere, perform in this international dance festival. Now, this will popularize your local dance forms as well. Dance forms like Bharatanatyam, because you find that there are various art forms, dance forms, which are on a decline. So the globalization gives them a stage. Globalization gives them a market. Globalization, through globalization happens. Sorry, neolocalism happens. That they promote their culture, they promote various cultural specialities on an international stage. So amalgamation, the point about amalgamation has to be limited to introduction, because when it comes to your body part, it has to be more about how globalization is helping you promote this diversity, conserve this diversity of culture that you have. Also, just think about this. There is another level of impact that you have already missed on. Please, someone please bring it up so that I have confidence that I have taught you something today. Think of other levels of impact. Anyone? Just think about the backlash. Now, because of backlash to globalization, you find that the people who are actually coming up in this backlash, they are promoting the Indian culture. They talk about very specific things from Indian culture. Also, you think about, you can take example of yoga. You can take example of, say, Ayurveda, how they are becoming significant, how they are getting popularized in the West. Because what happens is yoga was on a decline in popularity in India. Then it got a center stage in your international, arena. And just because it was popularized by the Western media, it was popularized by the Western society, it found its ground, it held to its ground in India as well, thereby strengthening the cultural specialities. So, be it matters of health, be it matters of various other art forms, you can always give examples here. So, yes, Ragini, so we say that because globalization is, say, leading to a decay in our culture, we are forgetting our, say, cultural aspects. Globalization is also, and as a backlash to this process, cultural specialities are also getting strengthened. So please tell me if you understood this backlash point. So it is not coming directly from globalization, but because there is a backlash to globalization, because there is a complete rejection of these global ideas or global culture, your specialities or your local specialities, cultural specialities, become significant. So this can be your body part. Please tell me, have you understood this question? Give a quick thumbs up so that we can move forward. If not, I'll take up those aspects, whatever you have not understood. Anyone who hasn't understood the topic or the question, and I hope the one who had asked a question about cultural homogeneity, they got their answer as well. Please give a quick thumbs up. Okay. Okay, so what we have done is we have understood what is globalization. We have understood what are various features of globalization. Then we jumped into various impacts of globalization. We looked into the economic, political, environmental dimension, and then we moved on to socio-cultural dimension of impact of globalization on Indian society. So when it comes to socio-cultural impact of globalization on Indian society, the first thing that we did was we understood various levels of impact, how globalization can impact Indian society on various levels. So we understood those four ideas. Then we moved on to the impact of globalization on various social groups. Then we understood the impact of globalization on various social institutions. Then we moved on to various art forms. And ultimately, we discussed this question wherein they were talking about cultural homogeneity and cultural specialities. So even though this question has not been directly discussed there, but it is easy to understand. Once you understand the crux of the question, it'll always become very simple for you to answer. So what is cultural homogeneity? You take up a couple of aspects of your culture and you see that your culture, rather than being heterogeneous, because otherwise your eating habits were different. You move from one region to another, the eating habits differed. You move from one region to another, your language differed. But now with globalization, you find that everyone looks pretty much the same. Everyone eats similar kind of food. Everyone wears similar kind of clothes. Thereby, we can say that the culture is getting homogeneous because of globalization. And how it strengthens the cultural specialities, we have discussed the role of technology, the role of these international dance festivals. You can think of various fairs that take place. think about the Surajkund Fair that happens here in Haryana, so which also promotes these cultural specialities. Okay, moving on to the next part. So I think I've repeated cultural homogeneity. Yeah. Moving on to our next force of change, that is urbanization. So far we have discussed modernization, secularization, globalization. Now we are moving on to another force of change, that is urbanization. Now if I show you this picture, you'll say that there are few images that you would relate more to rural areas, and there are a couple of images which you would say that these are urban areas. These are urban areas, whereas these are rural areas. Now, but if I ask you a question, what is it that made you answer this? What is it? What are the features on the basis of which you say that this is rural area and this is an urban area? What are the features on the basis of which we can say that? Let's start our discussion here and then proceed with what urbanization is. Okay, so the infrastructure, the culture of people sitting together having a discussion, yes. The kind of environment that you have around, yes. Occupation, great, because here they're involved in primary say occupation, that is agriculture. Here it is an example of service sector. Here these buildings can directly relate to service sector, great. So what you did was that you looked into a few aspects which can help us differentiate between rural and urban areas. So we will come to those aspects. What all are those aspects which differentiate the rural and urban? The primary one being your occupation. Most of the people living in rural areas are engaged in agriculture, whereas most of the people living in urban areas are engaged either in the industrial or the service sector. Similarly, then you think of infrastructure. The infrastructure in urban areas is better compared to rural areas. Infrastructure related to health, infrastructure related to education, infrastructure related to roads. So any kind of public infrastructure is better in urban areas compared to rural areas. Then you attach it to the idea of modern as well. That in urban areas, there is a modern way of living. And when you say modern, you already know all the aspects, all the dimensions. In urban areas, you would say the family structure. In the family structure, you'll find you mostly have nuclear families. In rural areas, you would say the form of families is joint. Similarly, in urban areas, you can say that people are more isolated. People have a sense of individualism. Whereas in rural areas, it is more about the idea of being a collective whole. Then there can be other cultural differences between rural and urban areas. So there can be economic differences when it comes to, say, the political idea or administration. There will be differences because in rural areas you'll have panchayati raj institutions, whereas in urban areas you'll have municipalities and other urban local bodies. Then on the culture front, you'll find that the structure of family is different. The way marriages are being carried out is different. Then you think of various other aspects of culture. You think of your eating habits. You think of the kind of clothes that you wear. Because in rural areas, you can see, yes, you can find similarities with urban areas, but you still find at least a few people wearing the traditional dresses. So this is what differentiates the rural and urban. Now, what is this process of urbanization? The process of urbanization says that more and more people are starting to live in the cities. The population of the cities is increasing. More and more people are migrating to these urban areas. This is what the process of urbanization is. Increase in population in urban areas and increase in migration from rural areas to urban areas is the process of urbanization. Now, if you look at various trends of urbanization, you'll find in global trend that urbanization has been on rise and your urban population has exceeded your rural population. when it comes to the case of India, you still find that urbanization has been on an increase over the years. But still, India is primarily rural. In India, you find more and more population living in rural areas compared to urban areas. But now, this statement that I've made is coming straight from your census 2011. But once there is another census, you'll be able to find that what is the exact situation now. Because through satellite imaging, we find that the areas which were considered to be rural previously have now transitioned into urban areas. They have the basic amenities that urban areas have. The population has also increased. And I'll come to this, that how in India we look at what is urban and what is rural. These were basic ideas about urban and rural based on various dimensions. Now let's look at this question. This has been asked in the previous year. It said, India has not been able to tap the full potential of urbanization. This is the question. So this question is again related to the impact of urbanization on Indian society, and how is it that and also it highlights the issues related to urbanization. So this question talks primarily about issues related to urbanization, and also about the process of urbanization in India. We will come to this question. We will come to the next part of urbanization. What are the problems associated with urbanization? How is it that we can fix these problems related to urbanization? What all is encompassed under the idea of urbanization? We'll come to all those ideas. Let's start with the basic definition that is done. And also, when we were talking about modernization, we said urbanization is a subset of modernization. Also, when we talk about development, because this is what the idea of development is. When we think about the idea of economic development and socio-economic development, we relate it more to urban areas. We always say that the rural areas are far less developed as compared to urban areas. Why? On the basis of amenities that are available, on the basis of electricity, whether it is available or not, on the basis of the primary economic activity. Because we see that even though most of our population is engaged in agriculture, but you still find it is the service and the industrial sector which contribute the most to our GDP. So in those terms, you can say that urbanization is a subset of development. Moving on to the process of urbanization. So when we were thinking about what differentiates rural and urban, we were basically looking into these aspects. So we were saying that the structure of family changes in urban areas. The structure of, say, the way your institution of marriage is carried out changes in urban areas. There are cultural changes when it comes to the way people dress, when it comes to various value systems. So in that sense, you can think of urbanization as all these processes. The first idea is it is a geographical process. Why? Because we are saying that migration from rural to urban areas amounts to urbanization. So it becomes a geographical process that people from one geographical area are migrating to another area, thereby increasing the population there. And while understanding the impact of urbanization, I'll tell you something that is generally missed, and we'll come to that with after migration. Then also it is a geographical process in the sense that it also depends on the geographical advantage that an area holds. That if an area has better connectivity with other cities, with other bigger cities, or better connectivity with ports, the chances are that those areas will be developed as urban areas. Why? Because they'll become trading centers first, and ultimately multiple industries, service sector units will come up there. As an economic process, you find that rural areas transition to urban areas once most of the population starts getting engaged into industrial or service sector related work. So in rural areas, it is agriculture or primary economic activity is agriculture, whereas in urban areas, it is different. It is either industrial or service sector. That's how you can think of urbanization as an economic process. And as an economic process, you can think of urbanization directly related to development. As a political administrative process, you find that in urban areas, you have different arrangement. You have a different administrative system compared to rural areas. In rural areas, it is the panchayats or the panchayati raj institutions. Whereas in urban areas, it is the urban local bodies which become important. And the way in which this administrative process is being carried out is also different. It is way more structured in urban areas compared to rural areas. And we'll also come to these aspects of governance, financing, etc., when we are talking about the suggestions to improve the ills or to cater to the ills of urbanization. Now, as a socio-cultural process, as already discussed, there are changes in the family structure, our eating habits, the clothes that we wear, the value system that we have, everything changes when it comes to urbanization. And now I need not emphasize on these aspects because these have already been covered. And that is the reason I take up these salient features of Indian society first, and then we look, and that's why I make everyone look at those institutions to those features in the light of change, because this is how the nature of the question is. They'll always be targeted on social change. So I keep repeating that. Why? So that you remember. Now, according to Census 2011, urban areas can be the statutory towns, census towns, and outgrowths. What are these? Your statutory towns are all the places with a municipality, corporation, cantonment board, or a notified town area committee. But then there can be census towns. Now there are areas, there are say urban areas which do not have these bodies available, and I hope you are aware of these bodies from your urban local bodies chapter in polity. But there are other few factors on the basis of which, when the exercise of census is being carried out, they designate a few towns as census towns, because otherwise they were considered to be rural areas. So what are these three conditions? That the population should exceed 5,000, and it is not just limited to population, but the population density has to be at least 400 persons per square kilometer, per kilometer square or per square kilometer. That the population has to be more than 5,000, and the population density also has to be more than 400 persons per square kilometer. Then apart from this, at least 75% of the working male population, because it is actually male population that they look into, at least 75% of the working male population should be employed outside agricultural sector. This is what the definition of a census town is. If they fulfill all the three criteria, they can be termed as census towns. Then apart from this, there are outgrowths. So say this is a city where people are migrating, people are living. What you'll find is, over the years, this area will start getting overcrowded. The population density will increase so much that it would not be able to handle the population. Then what happens is, the areas around this city will also start getting an influx of people, because people will think that if there is, say, proper public transport system, if there are proper means of transport, I can live a little outside these urban areas and maybe travel for work, travel for college, travel for school. So these outgrowths are nothing but the areas around these cities, these urban areas, which get developed over the years, which will have a huge influx of population. Why? Because people would prefer staying in these areas. Just take example of your entire NCR, National Capital Region. You find that these were actually villages which have been developed, which have the infrastructure of cities now, and now are considered to be cities. So these outgrowths are areas within the range of these cities, which are actually rural areas, but they get good infrastructure and amenities like permanent roads, electricity, drainage system, educational institutions, etc. So these are what? These are outgrowths. These are also considered to be urban areas. Why? Because they have the population, they have basic amenities, etc., to satisfy all the conditions to be an urban area. Jent has asked a question, but this urbanization is leading to overcrowding of cities. Jent will come to this question with impact of urbanization on Indian society. It will be covered there. Do not worry about it, because this is what the problem now is. The moment you step in any city, the first thing that you notice is the sheer population density of that area. That infrastructure is secondary, because now you find that a lot of villages, most of the villages in a country are now, they have good roads. Yes, they would not have the amenities as good as urban areas, but there is a visible difference in the population density of those areas, which basically differentiates them to from rural areas. Now, what are the causes of urbanization? We are saying people are moving from rural areas to urban areas, which is called urbanization, and the population in urban areas is increasing. But what are the causes behind this urbanization? So, as you have already highlighted, that it is for the sake of better opportunities, it is for the sake of, say, better healthcare facilities, it is for the sake of better educational facilities, better infrastructure, better quality of living, better quality of life. People migrate from rural areas to urban areas. So one cause of urbanization is migration from rural to urban areas. And the second cause of urbanization is population growth in urban areas. Urbanization is what? Urbanization is the increase in population of urban areas. This increase in population of urban areas can happen because of people migrating from rural areas to urban areas. Then also you have a population living in these urban areas, which will also reproduce. That will also amount to increase in population of these urban areas, which is basically urbanization. Now, what we'll do is, first we'll cover the dimension of migration, and I believe you would have already covered this with the human geography, but we'll nevertheless cover it here so that you understand that how this urbanization is taking place. And the question that Jayant has raised, that urbanization is leading to overcrowding of cities, which is a problem, how can we tackle it? Because ultimately, the causes of urbanization are going to give us answer of how to tackle this situation. Because one idea is stop the population growth in urban areas. Maybe impose a one-child policy or a no-child policy so that the population doesn't increase. Another way can be to maybe stop migration. Right, these are the primary ideas that will come to your mind, but we'll come to these one by one when we think about suggestions. Now, first thing is, let's talk about migration. Migration is basically people moving in and out of a country, a place, or a region. In our context, we have to think about particularly rural to urban migration, because this is something which ultimately leads to urbanization, which ultimately leads to increase in population in these urban areas. Now, when it comes to migration, can anyone tell me what can be the possible reasons of migration? One is better economic opportunities, etc. What can be other reasons of migration from rural to urban areas? Can there be other reasons of this migration? So yes, it is done. Better education, better economic opportunities, etc. is done. Apart from this, can there be other reasons of migrating from one area to another? So yes, you can move for geographical advantage. Maybe the land there is fertile, soil there is fertile, because do not think primarily in terms of rural urban, but yes, you can move for a better, say, geographical advantage. From difficult terrain, you can move to a simpler terrain where it will be easier to live. Then for the sake of better infrastructure, great. Then Ragini has highlighted that because there are disturbances, there are political troubles, political issues, social issues going on in one region, people tend to migrate to other region. Think of your refugees from, say, Syria. Because of the political trouble in that region, people are migrating out of that region. Great. So terrorism can be one. Yama has highlighted marriage. So yes, because of marriage, you can always migrate from one region to another. And we have already discussed your neo-local families. So for a better lifestyle, yes. For job, better health facilities, etc. For business opportunities, great. Now what we'll do is, rather than say haphazardly counting these factors, we'll simply arrange them in dimensions. So there can be an economic dimension. The economic dimension can be that the person who's migrating from one region to another, they're looking for better economic opportunities. But at the same time, they are migrating because there are no opportunities available in their area. They do not have sufficient land to say carry on, to carry agriculture. They are landless. They are poverty stricken. So for better conditions, they are moving there. Similarly, if when it comes to the social idea of migration, that why people migrate, they can migrate because of various social reasons. As Jamia has highlighted marriage, that after you get married, you migrate to another region. Then also, if you are, say, looked down upon in the society, you are not accorded enough respect in the society, you might want to move out of that society to another region. Then similarly, maybe the dominant caste or the dominant religion is making it difficult for you to sustain, is making it difficult for you to survive in that region. So you migrate to another region. For example, in Uttarakhand recently, it was in news that people from a certain people from the Muslim community, fearing their lives, they have migrated from that region to another region. Then also you can think about various legislative measures. Can anyone suggest a legislative measure here which can become a reason for migration? One can be your authoritarian government. Apart from that, there be a reason, because can there be a legislative measure because of which people move out of one area and move to another area? Citizenship, great, Aniket. So if they are not accorded citizenship, so you think about the say exercise that India was supposed to carry out with respect to the Citizenship Amendment Bill, Citizenship Amendment Act, because it was passed, people would have migrated. Why? Because the government has asked them to. Then because of environmental reasons, that that an area is flood prone, that an area is drought prone, because of which people start moving to other areas. Then it can be demographic reasons as well. So think about this. You have moved out for an economic opportunity to cities. Now your parents are left behind. But now they are getting older. And 2 years down the line, you say that you would not be able to survive there on your own. It's better because I cannot leave my job and settle back in the village. So it's better you come down to the urban areas, or you come down to the place where I live and leave that area. So people migrate on the basis of their needs when it comes to factors related to age. Then it can be this migration can also happen because of, say, for instance, the growth rate. If the growth rate in that region is high, people would not find enough economic opportunities, people would not find enough resources, and they would have to move out of that region. You see that in India, there are a lot of places where clean drinking water, clean and safe drinking water is not available now. So what option do people have? People have to migrate to another area in search of those things. So fragmentation of land, yes, fragmentation of land can be another reason, which has been covered with economic, but this land fragmentation can happen because the land has been passed on through generations, or it can happen because of your land sealing act. Great. So infrastructure projects by the government, great. So the government, for the sake of creating newer public infrastructure, they would displace a lot of people, and those people would have to relocate to another area to survive. What is that? Migration from one region to another on the basis of multiple factors. Now, you would have realized that out of these factors, one is that we have broken them down into various dimensions: economic, social, political, etc. Then the other idea is few of them are pull factors which pull you towards urban areas, and then a few of them are push factors which push you out of rural areas. So your poverty, lack of opportunities will push you out of rural areas, but the better amenities that are available in urban areas will pull you towards urban areas. The better quality of education will pull you towards urban areas. So all these factors that have been mentioned there can be basically classified into push and pull factors. Now, I hope you have understood the idea of pull, that the urban areas are pulling you towards themselves by offering better opportunities for work, by offering better opportunities of education, by offering better quality of life. And at the same time, you can say that there are few factors that push you out of rural areas, that they do not have land, they're landless laborers, they're not getting any work, they're poverty stricken, they do not have sufficient educational institutions, which become push factors to push you out of those rural areas to urban areas. So you can just go through these. These are fairly easy to understand once you have understood the idea. Now, one idea is what are the causes of migration. Then the other important idea is the consequences of migration. Now, understand this. Let's say this is the rural area and this is the urban area. People are moving from rural area to urban area. Now, what we do is generally, whenever a question such as this is asked, we focus primarily on the urban area. As consequences of urbanization, we will say that the population is increasing, the population density is increasing, people are not getting jobs, people are not getting clean drinking water, etc. So we focus entirely on what are the problems in urban areas. But as a consequence of migration, things happen here in these rural areas as well. In these rural areas, you'll find that, let's take example of Bihar. In Bihar, you find that most of the young working age population, male working age population, migrates out of Bihar to other areas, to other states, to take up any kind of economic opportunities that they can find. The reason is that they do not have opportunities available in Bihar. For the sake of education, those children would move out, leaving behind only the elderly, leaving behind only the women in those rural areas. But when it is only the elderly and say female population, how are they supposed to carry on agriculture? How are they supposed to take care of the security needs of each other? So when when migration happens from rural to urban areas, it is not just urban areas which get impacted, but also your rural areas. That these rural areas will have very scarce population. The demography of these rural areas will change as well. So when I say demography, just think of few factors like population. The population will decrease in these rural areas. The population goes down. The population density also goes down. The proportion of elderly in the population increases. Why? Because generally it is the male population, male working age population, which moves out, which migrates to other areas. Then also the sex ratio will also get impacted. What will happen to the sex ratio in this case of migration? Please suggest. What will happen to the sex ratio? Will it increase or decrease? So Chituri and Sneha are saying that the sex ratio will decrease, but actually the sex ratio is going to increase. Why? Because it is the working age male population which has moved out. So there'll be more number of female members in the society as compared to male members, as the male members have moved out. Right. So yes, Himanshu and Vishal are saying that the sex ratio will increase. So everything will have consequences, or this migration will have consequences on both rural and urban areas. So this increasing proportion of the elderly in population will have its own problem that will be discussed with population. The change in sex ratio will also have its own problem that will be also discussed. And along with this, we say there are two themes that are generally studied. I'll just give you a brief idea here. So one is feminization of agriculture, and the other one is one idea is feminization of agriculture, and the other idea is feminization of poverty. They also follow from here. Feminization of the agriculture in the sense that it is primarily the female population which would have to take care of the agricultural activities. Why? Because the male population, working age male population, has left the rural areas. Similarly, these women will be at a disadvantage. Why? Because they do not have a source of income. And how much can a person living in another area taking up, say, a daily wage labor job, how able they would be to send money back home? So, which also leads to feminization of poverty. Yes, so Ragini will come to urban areas. Right now, we're discussing what happens to the rural areas. I just wanted to cover this dimension because this is something that generally goes missing in your answers. So, impact of urbanization is not just limited to urban areas. The impact of urbanization can be felt in rural areas as well. So, I hope you have understood this idea. We will definitely come back to what happens in urban areas, the consequences of migration. But let's finish this rural areas. So Aniket is saying that it will somehow alter the migration of male working age population from rural to urban areas, will also will also impact the power structure in rural areas. Now it will be the women who will be taking care of all the decision making. It'll be the women who'll decide what happens within the household and what happens outside the household. So they'll have a better position, which is a blessing in disguise. Yes, you're right. So these things will be also be covered when we take up population or demographic studies. These things will be covered there. But here you have to remember that these are the impacts of migration on rural areas, and on urban areas it'll be covered after we are done with this. So consequences of migration, demographic changes will happen. So demographic changes will happen both in rural areas and urban areas. In urban areas, the population will increase. In urban areas, the population density will increase. In urban areas, the sex ratio will get altered on the basis of what section of the population is migrating. So these can be a few demographic changes that can happen. Then there can be social changes. When you think of social changes, you find that people coming from diverse cultural backgrounds, people coming from diverse linguistic backgrounds are now entering the same place where they are going to interact on a regular basis, thereby sharing various cultural traits with each other. So one idea is that it'll be basically, you can say, celebration of diversity. Urban areas can be thought of in terms of celebration of diversity, because people coming from various religious, ethnic, racial, linguistic backgrounds stay together. Whereas in rural areas, you see that the population is more or less homogeneous, to the extent that you'll find there will be certain villages where you'll find people only from a certain caste. They are also homogeneous in terms of the language that they are going to speak, in the culture that they experience, right? So there can be social changes. These social changes will also extend to, say, family. The structure of the family will change in urban areas. It is also changing in rural areas. Why? Because people have moved out. But it will also change the structure of family in urban areas as well. So all the ideas that we have discussed about the change, etc., in culture can be mentioned here. It will also dent the caste system. It will also impact the caste system. It will also impact the institution of marriage, etc. These can be the possible consequences of migration as far as social changes are concerned. Then you think about economic idea. One idea is that people who have migrated to these urban areas will now earn in these urban areas and send money back to rural areas. Now, it would not be considered, say, as say something significant when we are talking within the national boundary lines. But these remittances become significant when it is international. When a person staying in another country sends home remittances, it becomes a considerable part of our GDP. Then the other economic idea is that of economic growth and underdevelopment. Now, these both things happen, and I'll explain everything with consequences of urbanization or the impact of urbanization. Here you understand simply that people who migrate from one area to another, they are going to take up some kind of job, or they're going to take up some kind of work, and ultimately contribute to the economic development of this area. But at the same time, the area that they have moved out of will become underdeveloped. Why? Because there are no people to contribute to any kind of economic activity there. And also, this underdevelopment happens in the urban area as well. You can understand it as an impact of urbanization. Why? Because the number of people that are moving to urban areas in search of jobs, it is not necessary that everyone is going to get a job. And they'll be forced to live in slums. They'll be forced to live below the footpath, on the footpaths. They'll be forced to live below the bridges. So the condition is going to be miserable, which reflects on the underdevelopment of these urban areas as well. Another demographic impact, as we have already discussed, is overcrowding and overburdening of cities. So overcrowding is directly related to population. But what is this overburdening of cities? Overburdening means, just think about this, every area will have limited resources when it comes to, say, availability of water, when it comes to availability of jobs, when it comes to availability of any kind of work related, education related opportunities, when it comes to number of beds available in a hospital. All these resources are limited. But if the population goes on increasing, you'll find that these resources will start getting overwhelmed. Then clean drinking water would not be available to all. Then electricity would not be made available to all. What is it? Overburdening of cities. And do not remember this right now. We will discuss these with impact of urbanization on Indian society. They'll be covered there. But right now, because migration and urbanization are going to have similar impacts, so most of these will be covered here. Then because of migration, alienation would happen. What is alienation? Can anyone tell here? What is alienation? Not the Marxist idea of alienation of the workers, but a general idea of alienation. Okay, I don't think anyone has any kind of energy left to contribute to the discussion. Let me explain this. So basically what happens is, you are coming from a certain society, from this rural area. In this rural area, everyone knew you. You had a basic identity in this rural area. You had people belonging to your caste. You had people speaking your same language. But now, when you move to urban areas, you do not know anyone. There are rarely people who speak your language. There are rarely people who know you. What does that lead to? It leads to alienation. Why? Because you do not even have your family here in urban areas. Your family is living in rural areas and you are here. You find yourself alone. So this alienation, this isolation is also a major reason behind the mental health crisis in urban areas. So you'll find, I'm not generalizing this, but you'll find that generally the worst cases of any kind of violence, etc., they happen in urban areas. Right? Beheading someone, people getting into a fight on the streets, etc. These are generally found in urban areas. The reason is, one idea is behind this is the collective, the idea of being a collective whole in rural areas, that it is one for all and all for one. So people have a sense of community living in rural areas, but in urban areas you are isolated, you are alone. So no one wants to interfere into each other's business. So people would not say stop any kind of violence act being committed. So recently you would have seen that there was a video of someone killing a girl in the broad daylight on the street, and people are just moving past that incident. It is happening and they are just moving away. The similar kind of thing cannot ever happen in rural areas, because everyone knows each other. Everyone has a sense of, say, collective spirit. Everyone has a sense of brotherhood. So these kind of violent activities would not happen. Yes, there can be, say, violence based on caste groups. There can be violence based on any other factor, but this kind of act would not happen. And also in urban areas, because of this alienation, because of this isolation, people start getting mental troubles. So this is what the idea of alienation is. This is also a consequence of migration. Then your elderly impact on elderly women and children has already been discussed, that what kind of impact will be there on elderly women and children. So elderly women and children in rural areas, and also elderly women and children in urban areas. So when we are looking at the impact, when we are looking at the consequences of migration and urbanization, we do not have to forget about the rural area from where people have migrated. You please do remember that, because it gives you, say, a couple of points for conclusion. It can give you a couple of points for introduction. It can help you portray in front of the examiner, in front of the evaluator, that you know your thing, that you understand these aspects. And your information is not just limited to what is available in the books, right? Because generally these aspects go untouched. They are not being discussed, even if you take up these standard books. So yes, migration impacts on a social, economic, political, and environmental level. Yes, it is. So what we'll do is, now we are going to move away from migration, because migration is one of the factors of urbanization, is one of the causes of urbanization. With this understanding of migration and urbanization, we are going to move towards impacts of urbanization. So what we'll do is, today let's look at a few trends of urbanization in India, and look at how is this urbanization a peculiar phenomena in case of India. And then on the next Saturday, we'll take up your impacts of urbanization on Indian society. So if you look at population, still the majority of our population lives in rural areas as compared to urban areas. But the thing is that the population density is very high when it comes to urban areas. So in rural areas, you have a huge amount of land which can easily sustain this population. But when you talk about urban areas, the land, the resources, everything is limited. And this population, even though it looks mere in front of the rural population, but it is not. It leads to one of the highly or one of the densely populated regions across the globe. It is not the most densely populated, but one of the densely populated regions across the globe. Then also there has been an increase in the rate of urbanization. That the rate of urbanization is also increasing. The rate at which people are moving from rural areas to urban areas is also increasing. So these numbers are given. You need not care about these numbers. They are not important. This is just to show you the trend. Also, you'll find there is a north and south divide when it comes to urbanization. You'll find that your southern states of, say, Tamil Nadu, etc., are more urbanized compared to your northern states. And when it comes to most urbanized states, you'll find one union territory, that is Delhi, and then Goa, Mizoram, Tamil Nadu. These are the most urbanized states. Then if you talk about the least urbanized states, you can obviously think of your Himalayan states, followed by Bihar, Assam, and Orissa. Why? The level of urbanization is low. Also, the level of economic development is low. So when it comes to, say, all the socio-economic indicators, you'll find that Bihar, Assam, Orissa, Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, these are the areas which you generally find lagging behind. Now, how is it a peculiar phenomena in India? In India, you find that the urbanization or the rates of urbanization increased only after the service sector was started booming. Because in other countries, you'll find, in other urban areas, you'll find it is generally the industrial sector or the manufacturing sector which is responsible for urbanization. But here, in case of India, you find that it is mostly because of the tertiary sector, that is your service sector, that the rate of urbanization increased. So in other countries, it is secondary sector or industrial sector led growth, whereas in case of India, it is tertiary sector led growth. Then The main sectors for growth here in India are communication, transport, services, and construction, which became the primary reasons behind this increase in rate of urbanization. Then already told that the southern states are more urbanized than the northern and the eastern states. Why? Because of various factors. Can anyone tell me, can anyone suggest what are the various factors on the basis of which you can say that the southern states are more urbanized? Why are southern states more urbanized than the northern states? Why are the levels of economic development in the southern states better than northern states? Educated population, yes. More IT companies is a consequence. Welcome to that. More population is not true. They actually have lesser population compared to the northern states, because northern states you have Indo-Gangetic fertile plains, which attracts a lot of population, and you find that Uttar Pradesh, etc., these are highly or densely populated regions. Okay, so there are two reasons. One is that because of better levels of education of people and the investment in infrastructure in the southern states, you find that when the survey, because we are saying it started with service sector, the rate of urbanization increased or multiplied only after the service sector started booming. So I'm saying for service sector, you need infrastructure and educated people. So the southern states provided both. I don't think I've mentioned this. Okay, I've mentioned this. So the southern states provided both skilled labor and better infrastructure, because of which they attracted a lot of foreign direct investment, and ultimately they have better levels of urbanization compared to North India. Then there is a question. There is a question that has been asked. Okay, that I have already shown you that question. So this statement says India's urbanization is often termed as over-urbanization or pseudo-urbanization. What does that mean? Now, what we'll do is I'll just give you a brief idea about this thing, and what we'll do is we'll stop our discussion today and then pick it up on Saturday, because otherwise we would not be able to complete the next topic that we pick up. So India's urbanization is often termed as over-urbanization, as someone has suggested that this leads to an overcrowding of cities, or pseudo-urbanization, that is not true urbanization. It is also synonymous with that question that they have asked in the past, that India has not been able to realize the or tap the full potential of urbanization. It is a similar question. It is a similar statement, right? But what are the reasons? Apart from all the other reasons that will come with impact, that I'll make sure that you understand, one idea is that you find that in India, transitioning from rural to urban areas, you'll find that there is no in between. You have rural areas, then you have big cities, which cater to most of the population. More and more number of people go live there, which leads to a virtual collapse in the urban services, that there would not be proper availability of clean drinking water. They would not be able to make sure that every household gets electricity. So what happens is, rather than this urbanization evenly distributed, rather than even distribution, rather than even distribution of urbanization, it is concentrated in a few regions. It is concentrated in a few cities, which basically leads to overcrowding and overburdening of resources in those areas, and at the same time, underdevelopment and impoverishment of other areas. So that is what the problem with India's urbanization is. Need not think a lot and worry a lot about this problem of urbanization in India, because ultimately the effect of urbanization on Indian society are going to be more negative than positive. Because when we think in terms of economic development, yes. When we think in terms of better infrastructure, yes. But apart from that, you'll find that most of the things, most of the effects of urbanization are negative in nature. So till now, if you have any question, you can please ask me. And what we'll do is we'll take up this discussion next Saturday. We'll start this discussion next Saturday, and we'll start with the effects of urbanization in India. And also, if you have any comments, any feedback, if you want me to change the way of discussion, that is happening or any other thing, you can please let me know. Do you have any questions so far? Do you have any questions here? Does your silence mean no? I just want to ask. Okay, so if you do not have any question, please try writing the questions that I've suggested, the practice questions that I've given, and that one previous year question also. And while taking down your notes, what you have to do is, we have left a few things undiscussed. We have not discussed a few things. So what you have to do is, please try to lay down the structure then and there itself. There are few things which I have just discussed and not written on the board. So for instance, factors or rather elements of continuity with respect to your family, with respect to your institutions of family and marriage. So I think we had discussed and had not written anything on the board. What you have to do is, the way we have treated caste system in the light of continuity and change, treat those institutions in the light of continuity and change as well. So once you understand caste system and how we have to go about it, it would not be difficult, because all the other aspects have been discussed. And yes, I know that we have discussed continuity, but I think I have not written anything. Please do that in your notes. Sneha is asking, how can we identify questions from the book? Because all the 4 papers are combined. See, it is very simple. So I think you're not doing the homework that I asked you to. You take up the syllabus, you keep reading the syllabus. From the syllabus, you'll be easily able to identify what question relates to which subject. And it is actually very simple in case of paper 1. Yes, in case of paper 2, you find a little overlap with governance questions. But in paper 1, they're easily identifiable, that these are questions related to social issues. At times, there can be, say, an overlap between your human geography and society questions, but still these society questions will have a distinct identity. Also, you can just go to the Byju's website. You can just open it on Chrome, the Byju's website, and just search for social issues questions. So they have compiled everything in one place. So from starting from 2016-17, I believe, you have questions for every year, all of them in one place. They'll make your task easier. Okay, so with this, let's conclude the session for today. It was a lovely time with everyone. Please, the ones who are not trying to say become a part of the discussion, please do, because we need more and more participation from everyone, so that it contributes, it actually leads to a better, healthier discussion, so that we have newer perspectives when it comes to introduction. I want you people to surprise me with the kind of introductions that you can suggest to various questions. Okay, thank you everyone, and good night.